Alright, got the gauge back for my 66 already. That was quick. And for anybody that was wondering, that's where the 77 is, and that's where the other 66 is. And actually, I don't know. I think I only actually made it into a video once. That one doesn't actually belong to us. It belongs to a friend of ours, but yeah, there it is. That's on all original. That one's 200 serial numbers, either ahead or behind mine. They're both 49s. Well, there it is. The needle no longer flops around doing whatever the heck it wants. And if you it doesn't even really move at all, so. And it doesn't appear they had to gut the gauge, because it doesn't look like they ever took the nuts off the back, so apparently they did it all through the front. I guess the only thing, I wouldn't even call it a complaint so much as an observation, when they crimp the benzol back on it, it's a little waffly on the back side, but on the front side you can't even tell. And I guess you can't fault them for it, because I would assume that unless you, well, I don't know about working on gauges, so I guess I don't know what kind of tools they got to use, but I'd assume that there's a special die and some sort of special press they use to crimp them benzols back on, and I'm assuming that if you don't have a die for that specific benzol, you're doing it by hand, which that's how they did it, is by hand. But all in all, at least outward appearances, it looks pretty good, so throw it in the tractor and see what happens. Yeah, hopefully I got you set up where you can see. Hopefully you don't bounce around too much. I got you mounted on the battery box lid. And pro tip, as long as you got the room to get it in there when you're putting gauges in, nut driver, that's a lifesaver. Never fails, you always manage to drop something, no matter how hard you try to avoid it, but we're going to try to avoid it. These tractors aren't bad. Changing the gauges in a 4-digit kind of sucks, just because the wiring harness got so much more complicated on the newer tractors. Make sure. don't look too bad. That might have been too far. Eh, damn it. That's pretty good. It looks like you're shaking a lot, and I apologize. There was no good way to put the damn camera to where you could see what was going on in this hole. Actually, I suppose I could have put you inside. Well, there's not really any good place in there either. At least, not a good place. Well, I guess my hand's in the way from seeing it. I don't know. Sometimes there's just no good way to film it. So we try our best. And there we go. The battery hold down was getting a little crusty on the flanges there, so I decided to clean that up and shoot some primer on it before it got any worse. You can buy them new, but that's an original one, so I'm trying to kind of milk it. But I'll wait for that to dry, see if I got any ant gauge action here. I'll be damn, it works. A little jumpy, but it works. That might even out after it runs a little bit too. It's battery might need charged up if you crank a little slow, but it works. Yeah, apparently the battery is just a little weak, and it also probably didn't help that I didn't bother to tighten the connections up because you got to take them off to put the battery tie down back in. So I just put them on there, and as soon as you crack it over and idle, it steadied right out. So there's nothing wrong with the gauge. I think it's just the system catching up from being kind of weak. But yeah. So I guess now that I know it works, I'll actually tell you where I sent it, because I wasn't going to say nothing if it turned out to be garbage. I sent it to a place over in Howell, Michigan, I think. Place called Bob's Speedometer. They got a really nice website. It sucks to use on your phone because it's apparently not set up for mobile, but on a computer it's really nice. And they have a bunch of different, they got a page with a bunch of different pictures of gauge clusters. Most of what they do is automotive stuff, mainly because most tractors don't have instrument clusters. They just have individual gauges, but they have some pictures of automotive instrument clusters from the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and all the way up through, I think the newest one I saw was for like a 90s Corvette that they have redone, and they do really nice work, at least from what I've seen. And obviously they fixed this, and it was $75 to do whatever they did. And I was gonna, when they called to tell me how much it was, I was gonna ask what they found wrong with it, just because I was curious. And they called me in the middle of the day while I was sleeping, and I was so out of it that when my phone started going off, I reached over and started banging my alarm clock trying to get it to quit, because I didn't realize it was my phone. So I woke up, gave my credit card number, and went back to sleep. I was so out of it, and I forgot to ask what was wrong with it. But I would almost be half tempted if we get another tractor with, well, actually we got that Super 77 down there in the barn that's got all the original gauges in it. I'd be half tempted to just send a set of gauges to them and see how much it'd cost to get an original set of Oliver gauges redone, because it says on their website that they do silk screening. So if they had a good set of gauges that you could see most of the face. They might even be able to make silkscreen patterns and silkscreen and gauge faces back to original too. But time will tell. But I'll put a link to their website in the description just in case anybody wants to check them out and get some gauges worked on or whatnot. So I am going to finish watching this damn paint dry so I can put the battery tie down back in, which it's primer, so it's quick dry and it can be too much longer. And then, because I know people are going to ask, we will run back up to the barn and take a look at that other 66. Alright, talk about this one real quick since it's here, and I'm sure people are going to ask. Like I say, this belongs to a friend of Dad's. We're kind of the caretakers of it because he didn't have a place to put it. He's actually an ex-Oliver employee, worked down here at South Bend in the tillage plant, but it's not much of a looker. Well, you need to see it outside. The lighting here sucks. It's straight as an arrow. The only thing fucked up on the hood actually is kind of rough. It's straight, but it's rough. They had a big dork of a Stanley over the hood muffler, and they just kind of like wadded the hood up right there to make room for it. And then back here they must have had a battery acid leak, and the hood's kind of rusted back here under the side curtain. But I mean, outside of that, this thing is a cream puff. All it ever did its entire life, we brought it from the son of the, or he bought it from the son of the original owner. All it ever did was run a 2-row pipe mounted planer and cultivate. It never did any drawbar work, and the drawbar hole is still damn near as round as the day it came out of the factory. The gear shift is tight, the PTO shift lever is tight, all the pedals are tight. I mean, this tractor has no hours on it whatsoever. But I mean, it's still got the original steering wheel with a really nice wooden spinner knob on it. I mean, the throttle is tight. I mean, I cannot explain to you how tight this tractor is. She is cherry. Obviously, when we got it, all the side curtains were missing, so we bought a new set from Lynch Farms. But that's really the short explanation of it. I'm gonna try to start it for you. The battery's it's got juice, but it's not enough to crank the tractor over. She'll usually crank start. We'll see what happens. It's kind of cold. I hate crank starting distributor tractors. You are more likely to break your arm crank starting a distributor tractor than a magneto tractor, because a magneto's got an impulse in it that cams over to give you your spark, and that's designed for low RPM starting, like crank starting. And distributors are designed to start off of a starter and higher RPM starting motor. And yeah, I just hate crank starting distributor tractors, but we shall see what happens. And safety tip, when you crank starting a tractor, your hand goes over the crank like that. Never, ever, ever, ever grab a hand crank like that. That will rip your thumb off faster than shit if that tractor ever kicks back. So, we'll see what I can do here. Usually got to get it on one certain piston and it'll go over. Not like that. And she will just sit there and tick away like that all day long. This is the smoothest running little 66. And this is the definition of a sweetheart. It steers easy. I love this little tractor. I mean, I love mine too. But this one's just cool because it's so unmolested. I mean, normally on a tractor this old, the wiring harness is all jacked up. People have been in there fixing it. we had to replace it, but the wiring harness was all the original cloth braid, and the only reason we had to replace it was because the cloth was starting to tear off and exposing wire. But the wiring harness was all original in it. The gauges were all original in it, but the faces were all rusted, so you couldn't read them. So we replaced them. I mean, yeah, this tractor is just a sweetheart. It's even got the original, pretty sure the original 45-degree Goodyear still on it. And the fronts are, all the tires on it are original. The only thing on it that's not right is this rim. That's a 4-spoke rim, and that's the original 5-spoke rim. We can't explain why they replaced that, but other than that, I mean, that tractor's perfect. One of these days I actually need to get it out and use it. The only thing that's done since we've had it over here is drove around. I need to get out and like rake hay for my buddy with it, or so I need to do something with it just to work it a little bit. But anyway, that's that. So I guess that does it for this one. We'll catch y'all on the next one.